Hi, Ambroise. Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining us here at Wifimilk.com, the podcast, a place where young entrepreneurs get inspired by people like you who don't just talk but take action. Yeah. So today we'll talk about your experience in funding. 5 startups in Dublin and Paris, and also your experience in funding Kuddos, which you're right now running it, and yeah. So starting with your background, can you introduce yourself and tell us why
Sure.
and how Kudos started?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Roger. It's a pleasure to be here. So yeah, Kudo started because of my past experiences. Actually, I started off with engineering for 3 years, and then I pivoted myself to marketing and entrepreneurship. And I took a position in London back in 2014, and then I founded my first tech startup in Dublin in 2016. And we had a good run, and it was great. We had 15 people on average, a CTO, a tech team of six developers. But eventually, I was so frustrated, by the time and the resources that we needed to launch products, iterate products, and I just felt like nothing was moving forward fast enough for us to
Yeah.
be competitive,
Hmm.
And so anyway, so the startup, didn't go through because my co-founder left in a hurry for a family issue, and I had to pivot the company. It lasted 6 months, and then I had to shut it down eventually. But after that, I discovered no code, and more specifically, low code,
Hmm.
in the start of 2019.
Okay.
And all that frustration that I had just went away because you don't need, you know, tens of thousands of dollars to launch a product. You don't need a
Hmm.
team of six developers. You don't need 6 months, right?
Hmm.
In
Yep.
in just a few weeks, you can have a digital working product on the market, and that's just amazing. And that's how the idea of Kudos just grew up in my mind, and
Hmm.
by saying, okay, now I know this technology, this new way of doing things, why not empower new entrepreneurs, or to launch products faster and be more competitive there than other startups. And so I met my co-founder a few months ago, and we just clicked, those kind of moments, and it just made sense, and it's growing super fast. So I'm really grateful.
Well, yeah, that's actually very cool. What was your, going back to your first startup, what was it about? Yeah.
We had the vision to digitalize word of mouth recommendations, from consumer to consumer, but for really high quality, cutting edge technology, like Fitbit bracelets, for example, the
Okay.
wristbands and everything, for IoT connected devices.
Cool.
And it was, likewise, a very growing, fast growing market,
Hmm.
um,
But
and it was super interesting as well.
yeah, with a lot of competition too. Yeah.
With a lot of competition, but we were reinventing it. We were reinventing the model.
Mm.
So it was super interesting, and we woke up with a vision every morning that not to change the world,
Yeah.
um, but to make the process better.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's what you gotta do, right? Like, yeah,
Yeah,
do something different that's not being done,
exactly.
and believe it. Yeah. So yeah, like, how did you? Because you told me offline you used to be a freelancer, right? How did you transition to being an entrepreneur? Like, what was the thought behind it? Like, why did you do it?
Well, I mean, being a freelancer is kind of a good MVP. I When COVID hit in March 2019, in March 2020, sorry.
20.
Yeah, um, I basically had a demand from a company to build a reproduction of a unicorn company that
Oh,
is called Doctolib, right, and has 200 developers and has been active for 7 years. And as a freelancer on my own, I developed the 80% of the features in 3 months. And so
oh,
that was a great, proof of concept. as a freelancer to have the ability of bringing such value for in such little time. And
Hmm.
it's not to brag at all, but I at the end of this experience, I said, what not? Why not scale it? Why not,
Hmm.
scale it for to make a business, but
Yeah.
also to help more people along the way. And
Cool.
that's I think the path to freelancer, and to entrepreneur and company, and it's just the continuity of what works. And
Yeah.
as long as you have something working as a freelancer, why not make it a company?
I mean, yeah, it's actually framing it differently. So a freelancer, you're doing it, but you put it in a company,
Yeah,
environment, and yeah, that's yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Hmm. Yeah. So knowing you've had five startups.
Yeah, like 4 startups and one side project, let's call it.
Okay.
you know
So yeah, like yeah. So you've had many startups and projects. So what's the largest one you've had so far?
So far, it was the one in that I built in 2016, that I found in 2016.
Well,
We were, on average 15 people, and we had a very nice office. It was very, we were really fortunate.
mhm.
Um, and sometimes we went up to 22 people,
Well,
because of outside freelancers or outsourced talents, basically. But yeah, that was the largest one yet,
okay, cool. And where was that? In
in Dublin
Dublin.
and
Okay.
Ireland. Yeah.
And you said you had nice offices. Like, is that like, did you pay for it, or like who? Like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Of course.
And do you regret like getting nice officers instead of like, for example, working from home, and like, because maybe you could have used that money for, like, I don't know, like, for other stuff in your startup.
Yeah, you're kind of right. I mean, it's
Yeah.
there is no right or wrong answer. I mean, it's two different approaches, two different ways of collaboration with team members, on a on a daily basis.
Hmm.
And each one has its pros and cons, right?
Yeah.
The fact to be in an office is the social interaction, the
Exactly.
social motivation,
Hmm.
and the vibe, that you're here with the team, and then you're in the same, in the same boat, in
Hmm.
the same car, moving towards the same objectives together. And when you have remote workers, of course has a lot of advantages, but it's a different way to approach, a business.
Hmm.
It's more like, okay, I trust you over there, and I trust you over there, and then we communicate over Slack and over Zoom and everything. It's
Hmm.
good as well, but it's a different culture, I'd say.
Yeah. 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 I mean, yeah. Personally, I prefer to be face to face with people, but yeah, COVID,
Yeah, of
it has
course.
changed a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, we need
Uh,
to adapt, right?
yep. And so, yeah. So, have you had any issues while scaling your startups? Or
Yeah, mainly, as I
yeah.
said, because of the tech. Traditional code is great, but it takes a lot of time, and maybe it was a mistake on my end as well to believe that we needed to scale to improve the product to scale.
Yeah.
But
Mm.
my focus at the time was to bring a great product to market,
Okay.
and to have a very differentiating product as well. And therefore, we spent a lot of time on the product, and that, to me today, when I look back, it's kind of a barrier, that I put myself in,
Hmm.
um, to scale the business. Yeah.
Okay. So, looking at the people side of it, like, was there a problem with that, like, scaling it with people?
Actually, the reason I went to Ireland, to build this company, is that it's an enormous tech environment, a bit less like San Francisco, right? Where
Yeah.
you walk in the street and you can feel the vibe, right? And that was why I went there, for this particular startup, because it's a great resource in regards to people there, because we had the opportunity to work with people that just finished their internship at Facebook or Google just next door, and that's just amazing. It's an opportunity that other startups may not have. And yeah, all the vibes. When I walked past Facebook and Google buildings every morning, to on my way to the office, I mean, it's a game changer in the atmosphere and the people you work with, for sure.
So you had those interns work for you, or
Some of them, yeah,
okay.
they just did their internship at Google, for example, didn't weren't accepted as a full-time job there after their internship, and then were looking for another job in another startup, and that's where we were, right? So
Yeah.
there are a lot of tech startups out there in Dublin, so we were not the only one, but it was a great opportunity for us, no matter what.
That's one of the pros of having a physical office too, right?
Exactly. You got it.
Cool. Yeah, and so knowing, you've pivoted from startup to startup, which are the exit strategies you have used? Like, have you sold them, or like, yeah, like.
I prefer no. I didn't sell the startup in Ireland because I had to pivot and then it shut down.
Okay.
But in terms of exit, I don't like talking about exit, to be honest. I prefer talking about pivoting
Okay.
because the reason um, of shutting down maybe a startup or putting it on pause is that the product or the business doesn't work, right? But if we stay agile enough and exploratory enough about the opportunities out there, we can still pivot the startup, without shutting it down. So
Yeah.
for me, then that's not what happened when I shut down my startup in Ireland. But for the next ones, that's what happened, and you can always find a niche in the market or another way to do things that may better suit the users you're talking to. So it's more of being, adapting to the situation than just saying, "Oh, I lost. Let's shut it down or do
Yeah.
something else." Right?
But I feel like at some point you need to know where to stop. Like, yeah, because I mean, yeah, you can keep going, keep going, keep going, but then you're, burning money in some way if there's no results.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, and I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs, like, they see their companies as, their babies, and I mean that, yeah, that's kind of cool, but yeah, I think
Yeah.
there has to be a point where you say, yeah, that's enough, and
Absolutely.
yeah.
And the point and a way to avoid that, in my opinion, is don't spend too much money at first, right? Just test something with the less money as you can. Don't have too many employees at first. Make sure your burn rate, your cash burn, is as low as possible. Just the necessary stuff, um, and see if it works. First before spending tons of money. And if it doesn't work, you pivot, you move to something else, and then you start investing money when you have some traction, so that the growth is linear, instead of being risky. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and yeah, like, but how would you say, at what point you have to spend money? Like, once you've proven your product or service works, or like, yeah, go ahead.
It's just like you put $10 in a marketing campaign, for example, and
Yeah.
you see if those $10 bring you 100, right?
Hmm.
And then you do that 10 times, you get 1,000, and you do the same thing with $100, and maybe for just to scale things a bit. But at the end of the day, you scale like this very linearly, very gradually, and that's the only way to test a market, is to put small amounts to see the results proportionally, and then to scale things in terms of value.
Okay.
And that would be that is crucial, compared to someone that says, okay, I'm going to put 50,000 in that product or 50,000 in a marketing campaign without knowing if $10, proportionally,
Hmm.
is working already. And
Yeah.
that's the most important thing. And a lot of startups burn a lot of cash and fail drastically because they didn't start very small. And in my opinion, the
Baby
rule.
steps. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, baby steps. Start very small and then scale things as you make money. But don't invest from your own pocket tens of thousands of dollars. That doesn't really make sense.
Yeah. And yeah, because I feel like if you're spending your money, your own money, you're more conscious. Like you won't do weird things with it. Like you'll play it wisely. But if, for
Yeah,
example, you get money from if you get funding from someone else, then that's not your money, and then you don't see it as as
that's very true. That's
mhm,
very true, and that's why investors are so regarding about how did you do so far with the little money you had already, right? Because
mhm,
all startups start off with a little money from their pocket. Let's be honest, and then they go to investors to get a seed round or a
mhm,
pre-seed round where they'll get between 50,000 to half a million, for example.
mhm,
But investors all have the same question: what did you do so far with the little marketing budget that you had, and they
mhm,
want to see results. They want to see, okay, this guy invested $100 and he got 1,000. Let's
yeah,
scale that. I'm going to put 100,000 and he's going to get me 1 million, something like
mhm,
that, in the same approach. And that's why, yeah, baby steps are so important, and not getting funding very, as fast as you can is really important as well, because you want to convince investors instead of spending 2 years trying to raise some funds that will
mhm.
never come because you haven't done those baby steps in the first place.
So you think it's better not to look for funding at first, and then invest your own savings, and then look for funding?
I would say that would be my advice, and that would be what investors would say as well, in my opinion,
Okay.
because once again, they want to see results so far. They won't invest.
Yeah.
We're not in 1999 anymore, unfortunately. So investors invest on results and not on ideas anymore.
Mhm.
Um, that's what some people are not really conscious. Last year, I had someone coming to me and he said, "Okay, I'm going to raise 500,000 on this idea," and I he didn't have any results,
Yeah.
and he didn't make the funding so far. So, it just shows that the approach to investing and funding is very different now, and that you need to not, put as low money as possible from your pocket to avoid taking risks, but also show first results, and that's critical in my opinion.
And being realistic too.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah. So how have most of your ventures been funded? Have were investors involved?
Yeah. So yeah, that's a funny story actually, because we had some funds coming in, and one of the first investors in my startup in Dublin, it was at a time where I knew we were too small to get money,
Hmm.
but we were growing, but not as a super quick, fast pace,
Yeah.
Um, and one night I just go home. It's like 10 p.m. I'm really tired of the day, and I just look at my emails, and I see an email from an investor when I had asked nothing, and he just say, "Okay, I want to invest in your company. Let me know if we can meet and everything." So it was like it was really, it felt good, to be honest,
Yeah.
because chasing investors in a way is a very tiring process, a very time consuming process. Like Airbnb took 18 months to get their seed round, right? They
Yeah.
saw like 60 investors that all said no, one after the other. And
Hmm.
that's tiring psychologically and for the business, because it takes all your time, right?
Yeah.
Having investors come to you, that was I felt really fortunate to come across this guy. That's how it started. But today I have a different opinion on how to approach investments. I don't really like to raise funds, once
Okay.
again, because it takes a lot of time, and a business that grows gradually instead of raising funds and then burning cash, and raising funds and then burning
Yeah.
cash, is a lot more risky,
Hmm.
than growing gradually. So prefer
And
to do things less risky today.
okay. Yeah, so you were actually pretty lucky to,
Yeah,
for someone to come to you.
yeah,
Because I feel like that's not the case for, 99%. Maybe not that high, but yeah, a lot of
yeah,
cases.
totally.
Hmm.
Most of the time, it's really difficult, actually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that proves you had something good, right? On hands.
Thanks. I like to think so.
Yeah.
And that's what we actually do at Kuddos. We train new people that want to learn how to become a low-code developer, and we onboard them, and we give them a salary, we give them a job, and that allows them to get a new house, get a family, live comfortably. A good example of that is our first employee that was a beekeeper, still 2 years ago,
Wow.
and we met him a year ago, and now he's our first. I trained him in 2020, and he's our first low-code developer. And that's a beautiful story, because he always was on the margin of society, and today he has a regular salary. He has a girlfriend. He's happy in his life, and we're really happy to have him. And that is our vision, and it goes beyond money.